Why should you read philosophy? What is the practical benefit, the practical use of philosophy? Now, in the first place, philosophy creates a desire for knowledge, and secondly, it makes you a better thinker. So, let me explain. Okay, so let me try and explain um, by way of my own personal experience with how I discovered philosophy. And I discovered philosophy quite late in life. I was already in my 40s. And the first book that I read about philosophy was an introduction to philosophy. And almost the very first sentence stated there that it takes the average person 5 years to find their feet in philosophy. So I thought to myself, but how can it be? This is not rocket science. Um, Surely you only need to read a couple of books to understand it. But in any event, so I started reading philosophy, and I quickly found out why it is said it takes such a long time. Because philosophy um, is almost limitless. It covers almost everything under the sun to do with life, and also everything is connected. Everything you cannot understand philosophy by only concentrating on a few topics. Um, so I started to now read about, for instance, history and sociology and religion and science and politics and psychology and so on and so on and so on. And what happened then is that I realized my own limitations. I realized my own lack of knowledge. And that, I think, is an extremely important thing to happen. If you don't uh, realize your own lack of knowledge, there's no need or desire to improve yourself. Um, and that, I think, is almost the biggest value of philosophy. And that's also why I think philosophy should be a compulsory subject at school, because it creates this desire for more knowledge. So in any event, so now reading about all these topics, and I went for it quite hard. I read about 2 to 3 philosophy books in a month, and after about 3 years, um, I sort of decided by myself that I feel comfortable in philosophy, and I feel that I have now found my feet in philosophy. So I felt quite smug about it, because now the average person takes 5 years, and I've taken only 3 years. So I felt quite smug about it. But then a few weeks later, after this now, I happened to read a book written by a specific philosopher, and let's call him philosopher number one. Now, philosopher number one, he argued about a certain topic that I wasn't so familiar with. And I was very impressed with the way he constructed his argument, with the merits of his argument, and about his knowledge. And I was very impressed with him, and I accepted his arguments. And then a couple of weeks later, I happened to read another book by coincidence, a, a philosopher, let's call him philosopher number two, who was now criticizing philosopher number one. And philosopher number two picked holes in philosopher number one's arguments. And I was like reading it, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I didn't think about this. I didn't think about that. Quite clearly, philosopher number two is the man. He knows more. He's got the better knowledge and understanding of the topic, and I accepted then the argument of philosopher number two. only for me to also by coincidence a couple of weeks later read another book, say by philosopher number 3. And philosopher number 3 was criticizing philosopher number 1, and he was criticizing philosopher number 2. But now regarding philosopher number 1, he came up with new criticism. Criticism that I didn't think about, philosopher number 2 didn't think about. And so I thought, wow, I thought this topic was covered properly by these previous two philosophers, and just look at this, he comes up with new things. And then philosopher number 3 carried on to criticize philosopher number 2 and picking holes in his arguments. So now look at this now. I'm realizing that I made a mistake by accepting philosopher number 2's argument, because quite clearly philosopher number 3 is the man. He's the impressive. He knows much more than philosopher number 1. He knows much more than philosopher number 2. And I was at the point of accepting the argument of philosopher number 3 when I stopped myself and I said, I've seen this movie before. Let's not make the same mistake than what I made with philosopher number 1 and with philosopher number 2. Let's rather now take our time and look at this critically. Let's properly investigate what each of them are saying and what I think about it. And so I was now looking at it from my point of view. And then I think I realized that this is now actually what philosophy is about. And from then on, every time I was reading something, I had to keep on reminding myself, remember what happened there with philosopher number 1, 2, and 3. Don't make the same mistake. Look at it carefully. Think about it from your own perspective. Think about it independently from other people's opinions and views and arguments. And so it took a while for me. I had to keep on reminding myself of what happened. It took a while, perhaps about 2 years, for this to become habit, to read something critically and from my own point of view. So in the end, it took me about 5 years to find my feet in philosophy. Now definitely I'm not saying that I'm a philosopher. I came to philosophy very late in life. I've only scratched the surface. I have so much to learn, but what I have learned so far is the value, at least, of philosophy, and that is that it creates a desire for more knowledge, and it makes you a better thinker. It makes you a critical and independent thinker, and that is the value of philosophy.